Good day, and welcome to WNT, a channel where we try to understand what is really happening in the world, why it is happening, and where it may lead. Today we will look at 3 political topics that have been among the most searched worldwide in recent days. We'll start with a topic that is fundamentally changing how Europe thinks about its future: the shift in European security policy. Just a few years ago, a simple rule applied. Europe's security was guaranteed by the United States and NATO. Europe provided diplomacy, money, and occasionally equipment. But today, this arrangement is no longer working, and European leaders are beginning to say it out loud. The reason is not a single event, but a combination of several crises unfolding at the same time. The first and most visible is the ongoing war in Ukraine. Russia has shown that it is willing to risk long-term isolation and economic losses in exchange for geopolitical influence. In doing so, it shattered a core assumption of post-war Europe, that conflicts are resolved through negotiation, not force. But the problem is not only Russia. Just as significant is the uncertainty surrounding the United States. American politics is increasingly focused on domestic issues and competition with China. Europe is no longer at the center of U.S. strategic interest. And this forces European states to ask a question they long postponed. What if the United States one day says, "No more"? Do we have our own armies, industry, logistics, and political will? Here we encounter a deeper issue. The European Union is an economic giant, but militarily fragmented. Each state has its own army, its own priorities, and its own politics. Common defense means not only more money, but also a loss of part of national sovereignty, a politically extremely sensitive topic. That is why this is not only about security, but also about domestic political struggle. Increasing defense spending means less money elsewhere: healthcare, social programs, or education. Politicians must explain to citizens why defense matters more than today's comfort. And in democratic societies, that is always unpopular. At the same time, Europe's strategic identity is at stake. Either it remains a soft power, relying on rules, diplomacy, and trade, or it becomes a harder geopolitical actor, prepared to protect its interests by force. The effects of this shift will be felt by ordinary people: higher taxes, higher energy prices, a greater emphasis on security, perhaps even a return of debates about military service or civil defense. These were things that seemed unthinkable not long ago. And finally, this is not just about defense against Russia. It is about the kind of world emerging after the collapse of old certainties. A world where great powers prepare for conflict, where power once again matters, and where weakness means risk. Europe stands at a crossroads. It can remain dependent and vulnerable, or become expensive, strong, and more self-reliant. And this decision will not be made at a single summit, but through a series of subtle steps we are witnessing today. Steps that will fundamentally shape the next decade. Question for you: do we want to live in a Europe that relies on someone else to protect it? Or in a Europe that is ready to defend itself, even at the cost of higher expenses and unpopular decisions? Write in the comments where you believe the boundary lies between security and freedom. We will continue to follow this topic because it concerns not only politics, but the everyday lives of all of us. And now we move on to the second topic, which shows what happens when politics stops being conducted only through words and begins turning into open conflict within society. The United States has long presented itself as the cradle of democracy, freedom of expression, and political competition. Yet in recent years, it has become increasingly clear that American politics is no longer only sharp in its rhetoric, but dangerous in practice. The recent attack on Congresswoman Ilhan Omar is not an isolated incident. It is a symptom, a visible sign that political polarization in the United States has reached a stage where part of society no longer distinguishes between disagreement and an enemy. American politics today is divided into two camps that barely speak to each other. They are not engaged in dialogue. They are waging a cultural war. Each side no longer sees the other as a rival, but as a threat to the very existence of the state. And in such an environment, it is only a matter of time before words turn into actions. Immigration, identity, race, the role of the state, guns, freedom of speech. All of this has merged into one explosive cocktail in the United States. Politicians increasingly speak not to society as a whole, but to their loudest supporters. Because in today's American system, victory belongs not to those who unite, but to those who can most effectively mobilize anger. And here lies the paradox. Politicians publicly condemn violence, yet at the same time indirectly fuel it. Harsh rhetoric, oversimplification of reality, and labeling opponents, all of this creates an atmosphere in which radicalization becomes a normal reaction. If you consistently portray someone as an enemy of the nation, you cannot later act surprised when someone takes that literally. Attacks on politicians have another dangerous consequence. They gradually discourage ordinary people from public engagement. Who would want to run for office today, knowing it comes with threats, hatred, and the risk of physical attack? Democracy thus loses moderate voices, leaving only the most hardened actors behind. All of this is happening at a time when the United States is approaching another election. And instead of calming emotions, we are seeing the opposite: further escalation, further simplification, and greater emotional pressure. Because fear and anger simply sell better than reason. For the rest of the world, this is a warning. The United States is not just one country among many. It is a global actor whose internal instability has international consequences. A weak, divided America means a less predictable world, and Europe, Asia, and the Middle East all feel it. Perhaps the greatest irony is this. The country that spent decades lecturing others about democracy is now searching for an answer to a basic question itself: how to disagree without destroying one another. The question for you is simple. Is it still possible to bring politics back to debate? Or have we entered an era where emotions, not arguments, decide? Share your view in the comments. And now we move on to a third topic that shows what happens when people stop believing that change is possible from within the system. And now we turn to a country where these questions are no longer debated in studios or settled at ballot boxes, but played out directly in the streets. Iran, a country that has long learned that public patience has its limits. Iran is a place where the government explains to you every day that it knows what's best for you. And if you happen to disagree, you'll receive a lesson in morality or in physics, specifically the speed of a baton. In recent months, Iran has once again experienced a wave of anti-government protests. Officially, of course, nothing is happening. The people are happy, the economy is thriving, and the only problem comes from foreign agents. Reality, however, is far less poetic. High inflation, unemployment, sanctions, and years of frustration have created a mix with one unpleasant feature. It cannot be silenced forever. What's striking is that these protests are not about one single issue. They are not just about food prices, headscarves, or one injustice. They are about a system designed to be unchangeable. Elections exist, but only for approved candidates. Debate is allowed as long as no agreement is reached. And freedom of speech? Yes, if you remain silent. The regime relies on a proven strategy: endurance. Not reform, not compromise, simply waiting it out. Iran's ruling elite is betting that people will grow tired, that protests will fragment, and that fear will eventually defeat hope. And historically speaking, this approach has often worked. This time, however, there is one crucial difference. The protests no longer involve only the young, only women, or only cities. They now reach people who once supported the regime, or at least tolerated it. At the same time, Iran plays a dangerous double game. At home, it suppresses dissent. Abroad, it presents itself as a confident regional power, supporting allies, negotiating, threatening, maneuvering. Because strength abroad can compensate for weakness at home, or at least look convincing in official speeches. For the rest of the world, Iran remains a dilemma. Too much pressure may unite the regime. Too much caution legitimizes it. And so international politics moves in a space where human rights are discussed loudly, but decisions are made based on oil, security, and stability. And this is the key point. Iranian protests are not just about one country. They show what happens when people lose faith that a system can be fixed from within. When belief in promises, reforms, and just hold on a bit longer disappears. At that point, it's no longer about changing a government, but about changing the rules of the game. The question, then, is not whether the protests will continue. The question is, when and at what cost this story will break, and whether people's patience will run out before the regime's legitimacy does. This concludes today's overview. If you find value in looking at politics without illusions and in context, leave a like, subscribe, and we'll see you in the next episode. And don't forget to share your opinion in the comments.